And I keep saying this, it's like, it's not Nazi Germany. It's right here in the heartland.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
for inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up, and then later in the pod, we're really excited about our interview today. We sat down with author and scholar Russell Cobb, whose book, The Great Oklahoma Swindle, Race, Religion, and Lies in America's Weirdest State, is an incredible commentary, not only on the Sooner State, but really sheds light on what's going on in the country today. It is an incredible pod. You're going to want to stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, and how about you?
Well, I'm having a little bit of an identity crisis at the moment.
Are you now?
Yes, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
Let's take care of miscellaneous business first.
All right, let's do that.
Like a proper business meeting.
Robert's Rules of Order and all.
That's right. Proper business meeting. So yes, there's trash in the freezer you need to take out.
Jeez, really?
Yes.
I wasn't gone that long. Well, I was gone a while.
You were gone 10 days. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of trash in the freezer. And if you're questioning that, you should go back and listen to the last pod episode. Funnily enough,
Yeah, I see what you did there.
yes. So when you're out of town, I am scared to take the trash out at night by myself
Yes.
on trash
Because
night.
I mean, like cat, muskie,
Right,
so many
right.
critters
Or
outside
also
the doors.
the criminals who live in our backyard while you're away.
There are no criminals that live in our backyard.
Yes, there
we live in
are.
a very safe neighborhood.
No, have you not listened to any crime podcast? Come on. So yes, I'm fearful to take the trash out while you're out of town, and I don't want it sitting in the house, stinking up the house.
Yeah.
So the only logical place for it to go is the freezer.
So I do want to paint the picture of, I mean, our neighbors, we've got a 93-year-old neighbor across the street and a mom who just had a baby. So all the criminals on our street.
That's right.
So I can see where you're scared. Go ahead.
So I told the story last episode about, yes, I think it was last episode or maybe 2 episodes ago. Anyways, about the trash in the freezer. Or you outed me, actually.
I did out. Yeah.
You
It's like,
outed me.
well, I mean, come on. I
For
opened
the trash in the freezer. I will know. I got several inquiries from friends saying, "Do I need to come take your trash out?" No, this makes perfect sense. Like, you put it in the freezer because you don't want it to smell.
10 days is a long time, though.
So, anyways, so there's trash in the freezer.
I'll-
You want
I'll-
to take a pause and go take that out real
I'll take
quick?
care of it. Yeah.
All right. Anyways, so fast forwarding to this week's pod.
Yes.
You and I are super stoked about our interview today.
Oh my gosh,
with
yes.
Russell Cobb.
Yep.
But I feel like we need a little bit of a disclaimer here because the book that we are kind of focusing on with Russell is called The Great Oklahoma Swindle.
Yeah.
Race, Religion, and Lies in America's Weirdest State.
Yeah.
And
Published and released a couple of years
yeah,
ago.
yeah, it's not super
We
current.
get into that into the interview, but
We are per usual, like late to the party here.
we do live in Oklahoma.
Right. Exactly. So, yes, we stumbled upon this book, and I kind of explained that in the beginning of the interview. But I just wanted to disclaimer for our listeners, because I know our primary listenership is not, located here in Oklahoma. However,
But if you are sitting there thinking, what is going on in our country? Welcome to Oklahoma.
right. This one, I don't know. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, but also there are broader truths to be
100%.
learned from our conversation with Russell, from this book. The book is fantastic. Highly recommend it. However, back
Concentrate on the word swindle. Go ahead.
Okay, back to the topic at hand.
Yes.
I'm having an identity crisis because
I know where you're going with this.
you
It's
know
gonna
where
make
I'm
me
going
feel-
with this.
It's going to make me feel very uncomfortable.
Because I learned through our reading of this book and our kind of
yes.
in our side conversations about the history of Oklahoma and about rewriting history, learned I am not your first wife.
You are not my first wife. No, you were not.
I mean, so could I be considered the younger trophy wife? I'd be okay with that.
I don't know about that. No, you are. Yeah. Yeah. I'm doing the math in my head. Yes, you are the younger trophy wife.
Okay, like I'm fine with that. Okay. But anyways, so yes, I learned that I'm not your first wife, but I want you to tell that story and then we'll get into kind of a little more of the serious implications of that. So the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, thanks for bringing that up. And just our conversation with Russell today, talks about the origins of the state of Oklahoma and the mythology that overtook the reality in the territories between Oklahoma Territory and, I hate to use this term, Indian Territory, but that was what it was known as, and how Oklahoma became a state. Now, there's a lot more to that story that I think I've talked about in previous pods, but like 100 or 200 episodes ago, as far as like the tribes trying to develop their own state. The state of Sequoia wrote their own constitution. You can find that constitution in the archives of the University of Oklahoma Law School, but that's another story. But the reality is that when Oklahoma became a state, they had this marriage, and it was between Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory. And they actually did this symbolic marriage at the state capital, which was Guthrie at the time. Now it's Oklahoma City, but at Guthrie, between Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory. So they had
not problematic at
not
all.
at all, not at all. Back then it was just fine, Missy. It was just fine. So, Oklahoma Territory was this cowboy, big, Stetson hat, boots, the works, and this Indian young girl. And they married them on the state capitol at Guthrie to symbolize the coming together, the harmonious coming together between Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory.
It reminds me of a feast that was once had between colonizers and the native folks, right?
Yeah. For those on the Native American side, it felt more like the Red Wedding of Game of Thrones, but nevertheless.
Okay, we're getting in the weeds. Okay, so what did this mean for you
So
growing
at the 75th anniversary of our statehood, I was in elementary school in East Tulsa. And I do want to preface this. I think all of my educators were wonderful people. I think they were operating in the most genuine attitudes, and they really wanted to kind of try to highlight this moment. And so I love them to death. I mean, two of them actually showed up to my ordination service later on in life. So no shade on them whatsoever.
Right.
But at the 75th anniversary of statehood, I was at Walter Reed Elementary School. I think I was in third grade at the time. And so we decided.
Clearly looking to take a wife.
Oh, clearly. So in front of our entire school, which had to be 200, 300 students, first to sixth grade or kindergarten, K through sixth grade, parents, neighborhood at Walter Reed Elementary School, we have the assembly, Missy.
Awesome.
In the gymnasium. And I am dressed up in all of my native garb, which my family helped me get. So I had a choker on, I had moccasins on, leathers. I mean, just the whole works. And I look like and I hate to use this terminology, I look like a good little Indian boy.
Well, I mean, by design.
Yeah.
I mean,
they decided,
for better or worse.
I don't know why they decided to flip it, but I became Mr. Indian Territory instead of Mrs. Indian Territory. And they got
don't say her name.
I'm not going to say her name, the blondest, blue-eyed young girl that you could ever find in our elementary school. And she became Mrs. Oklahoma Territory. And before God and my classmates and the community, we had a marriage, Missy.
got married?
We got married.
Okay,
so many questions.
So many questions. But the funny thing is it wasn't until much later that you started kind of like questioning
Oh, no, it
this.
was just so natural. Yes, that's
Well,
what. Yeah.
the worst thing about that was probably you were in third grade. So
Right.
8 or 9 years old and you got married on stage. I'm quite certain that played well on the playground
Yeah.
for you, right?
Oh, yeah. It was top notch.
But yeah, so you have these things, and again, like you said, your educators were
Mhm.
treating it as a celebration of statehood and wasn't
Mhm.
this romanticized. And then much like Russell talks about in our interview, then you have this kind of awakening as an adult and realizing that the narrative was written in a different way.
Yeah. Reality versus mythology is a reality in our world. And when you go through it at a young age in a place like Oklahoma, you begin, I mean, you don't question it because there's a romanticism of it. There's that Western romanticism of it, of, cowboys and, yeah, that's a native culture, but, we celebrate the native culture, but we overcome the native culture to become what we are today.
Mhm.
And then you look back on it and you have this identity crisis.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, what we celebrated at a young age was not what happened.
Mhm.
And in Oklahoma, Missy, that happened all the time.
Right. And I think that was what was so great. Again, as our listeners, then anybody knows, I'm not a native Oklahoman
Mm-mm.
nor an indigenous person.
The eyes of Texas.
The eyes of Texas are upon you. Shall I sing the song?
No, please don't.
Okay. But I feel like as a human experience, many of us have had this kind of realization of the narrative not being exactly what you thought or what you were taught. And I feel like there's such a broader truth to be gleaned from this book, in particular about Oklahoma, which is so interesting. I love a good memoir. And to
Yeah.
me, this is a memoir.
It's a state memoir.
It's
Absolutely.
a state memoir. And so I love a
Yeah.
good memoir. And it very much kind of read like that or listened like that, I guess. And so I enjoyed hearing that, but then thinking of the broader truths of how we in America in particular, I don't want to speak for other places, have been sold something, and how important it is for us to pull back the curtain and really examine our histories and really examine our origin stories so that we can know better, we can do better, and move forward.
Mm-hmm. And for me, particularly as an Indigenous person that grew up in Tulsa, what really began to mess with my mind is the intentionality of why it was so important to reframe the story of Tulsa.
Absolutely.
Oklahoma City was a different story, but Tulsa,
Mm-hmm.
located in Indian territory. And as we will learn in our conversation with Russell, the origin stories of Tulsa are not created in the oil boom, but created within indigenous communities.
Long before that.
The remaking of that narrative
Mm-hmm.
and why that was so important to do so. That is damning, I think.
Right, I agree, and it just for those who maybe feared that exposure, there's not fear to be had in learning truth.
Mhm.
There's growth to be had from learning truth, and so I think this is why I hope our listeners understand that this is a little bit of a niche topic and interview. Obviously, we talk about ad nauseum. We live in Oklahoma, very involved here in the state, but there are truths to be gleaned from this. It is a fantastic book, great interview. We really very much enjoyed meeting Russell and getting to talk to him about this story.
Again, this is a little bit of a nuanced conversation and episode this week, but I hope that all of our listeners realize how important this conversation happens to be in the national narrative that we're facing today.
I hope so too. I found it very informative. I found the book just very enlightening and very enjoyable. So I hope that our listeners enjoy it as well.
Absolutely. So we'll be right back with Professor Russell Cobb and talk about his book, The Great Oklahoma Swindle. Good Faith Media is the new home of A Sermon for Every Sunday. This free resource offers lectionary-based video sermons by America's best preachers for use in worship,
Bible study, small groups, Sunday school classes, or for individual use. All you do is push the button. With a sermon for every Sunday, you can be inspired by and learn from some amazing preachers: Otis Moss III, Amy Butler, Brian McLaren, Starlette Thomas, Will Willimon, Michael Curry, and many, many more. Hundreds and hundreds of free sermons are waiting just for you. You can find them at goodfaithmedia.org or asermonforeverysunday.com.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Dr. Russell Cobb is a writer, media producer, and instructor at the University of Alberta, where he is the coordinator of the Media Studies program and director of graduate programs in the Department of Modern Languages and Cultural Studies. Cobb's work bridges the worlds of print and radio journalism with the digital humanities. His work has appeared in the New York Times, Slate, NPR, and The Nation. His book, The Great Oklahoma Swindle: Race, Religion, and Lies in America's Weirdest State, won a Director Specialist Merit Award from the Oklahoma Department of Libraries in 2021. His latest book, titled The Ghost of Crook County: An Oil Future, a Phantom Child, and the Fight for Indigenous Land, is currently available. Dr. Cobb, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are so excited to meet you. And I have to say that we brought you here under the guise of talking about your books and your work. But actually, what we want to know is a how-to move to Canada. So can you help us with that?
Yeah. Can you help us with the paperwork?
I just moved from Canada to Tulsa, and almost every single person I met along the way said one thing to me: "You're going the wrong way."
Okay, so at this point, I will switch and say this is actually an intervention.
That's right.
Yeah, you should talk to my wife. She's like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this?
Exactly.
And I said, just buckle up because it's going to be interesting.
It's going to be
I mean, I
interesting.
have a similar story.
Yeah.
but-
I went down to Texas and got a Texan and brought her up to Oklahoma. So
That's courageous of you. I
I'm-
admire your open-mindedness.
it's been a while, but we're getting there.
Well, Dr. Cobb, thank you so much for joining us. Again, you've got some incredible books, but our conversation today, we're going to focus more on the book titled The Great Oklahoma Swindle. And this is a kind of a fascinating story of how your book actually got on our radar. And Missy's the one that actually sent it to me via text. So tell Russell how we even got introduced to his work.
Yeah, so this was so random. A few weeks ago, we had interviewed another author about the book. You're gonna have to Karina Lane, and what was the book?
It was about executions.
Yes.
In the state of Oklahoma.
In the state of Oklahoma. And so
how botched Oklahoma does them.
Anyway, so I went to a book talk at a local bookstore here in Oklahoma City, and I saw that they were doing your book as one of their book clubs, and I thought, this looks great. I knew we would enjoy it, so I picked it up and immediately texted Mitch. He was out of town and said, listen, you need to get this book. I have a feeling you're going to want to talk to this guy. And within a few pages, he said, yes, I'm going to email him.
Absolutely. So strange way to get to where we are, but
yeah, I'm surprised that executions would be the segue to me, but I've heard weirder things.
But here we are. So Russell, let's start with origin stories. And you do a great job in the book talking about the mythology that is so significant in Oklahoma's narrative. And precisely, you and I grew up in Tulsa, and the mythology narrative that surrounds Tulsa. And you brought this phrase up, and it just, when I read it on the page, it just echoed in my ears because I heard it growing up as a child in East Tulsa, and that is Tulsa is the oil capital of the world. In fact, we got a 76-foot tall statue to prove it there in Tulsa. But the title seemed to be a strategy, that oil capital of the world, because it was a mythology, and along with the Oklahoma Land Run, it seemed to be those mythologies replacing other truer stories about Tulsa's and Oklahoma's origin. So can you tell us kind of some of the original stories? Because you tell the story of Tallahassee and Tecumseh, and the how Tulsa actually began, and then how the mythology kind of took over from there.
Right. I'm so glad you asked that question because my knowledge as a fourth generation Tulsan until about 10 years ago was really rooted in that mythology that really there wasn't much to see here until by this dint of divine intervention and risk taking, some brave men drilled a well and magical wealth poured like manna from heaven.
Mhm.
Uh, but it really the story is so much older than that. And I'm glad you asked because I'm actually wearing a shirt that represents the Council Oak.
Oh,
This is the
yeah,
Council Oak
love it.
I
tree.
love that.
What is the real founding of Tulsa in 1836 by the Loja Boja people, the tribal town, which is an ancient tribal town within the Muskogee Creek Nation, which I mean, I'm
Mhm.
sure Mitch, you know this
Mhm.
story better than I do. But it one of the things that just really fascinates me is the word Tallahassee, or what we'd say, a town like in Florida, and Tallahassee
Mhm.
is really just means old town.
Yeah.
It's a very simplified English translation. So that right there, the fact that Tulsa is derived from a Muskogee Creek word meaning old town should tell us that the origin story of Tulsa is not in 1896. That is but a small fragment of the history of Tulsa. It goes back millennia.
Mhm.
And so as a fourth generation Tulsan of European extraction, just knowing that and only learning that, in maybe 10 years ago, really set me on a journey to learn more about that and to question my own my own place, right, in
Yeah.
Tulsa.
Yeah. And I love, Missy, we talked about this previously, but I love the fact that in these mythologies that were developed to cover origin stories up, Russell talks about, you know, we talk often today about fake news, but the reality is this was fake news back then in trying to recreate these narratives.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting point. I love that you brought up just from jump about, yeah, false narratives are not new.
Mm.
I mean, we like to think that fake news is a new term, but it's not. And how in looking at the foundation of not only Oklahoma, but then we can broaden that out obviously into other places anywhere really in the United States and talk about the foundation that is being sold as something other than it actually was. So one of the things I want to talk about, I'm gonna come to this question as a Texan.
Oh, dear God.
And I want you to talk.
Protect yourself, Russell.
I
Protect
want you to talk
yourself.
about dumb oaky logic because when I was growing up, I was taught that was something different than what you explained in the book. So tell us about dumb oaky logic and what that is.
Oh, well, okay. So yeah, I mean, Okie is one of those terms that um among Okies, we say it with affection. If a Texan says it, we're ready to fight.
That's
Right, right.
right.
I'm glad you're across the state right now.
Yeah, yeah. No, I got that. I got that. I actually came up with that really thinking hard about a scene in in the movie
Chinatown,
Chinatown,
yeah.
the Roman Polanski movie, where the Jack Nicholson character, he's a private detective and he's trying to figure out, what is really going on. There's this tycoon in the movie that's monopolizing the water, and he's basically taking the water from the farmers. The poor farmers are the ones that are actually suffering because he's monopolizing the water for the city folk. But when he goes to investigate, and these farmers, which are they're Okies, right? It's said in the 1930s. That's when the Okies went out there, and they were poor. They were dirt poor. They were refugees. It's amazing how closely their conditions resemble the conditions of migrant workers today. They accuse they say, they are mad at the private detective for investigating the tycoon. the Jack Nicholson character is like, wait, I'm trying to figure out why
Right.
this guy is taking from you, right? And then he gets frustrated with them. He goes, "Oh, you dumb Okie," you know. He calls the farmers the dumb Okies.
Yeah.
But I think that was a telling scene because it really gets at what what I said, like you said, a logic. I think there's an entire logic there where people who control wealth and power, even monopolizing it as their benefactors, right? Rather than people in power that they should be contesting, they should be questioning. There's almost a feudal relationship between them, right?
Right. That it was just such an interesting. I loved in the beginning when you talk about you give this whole litany, this list of contradictions
Yeah.
about
That was
Oklahoma,
amazing.
and it just again you kind of start to expand that and think we all have this in our life, and I thought you did a really great job of kind of breaking that down in a great narrative way to teach about the people. So I thought that was really interesting. And I have another funny story that's going to lead to a little bit of a question. But I was finishing up your book this past weekend as I was driving to Tulsa for a nephew's birthday party, and it was kind of towards the end of the book where you do a lot of talking about the gathering place and about Oral Roberts and all of these things. And you're talking about the prayer tower that Oral Roberts built. The two of you probably have more information on it. I
Mhm.
just know it as a landmark. But what was so funny is I got to that section and then I got to my hotel room and checked in my hotel room. And I kid you not, do you know what the picture above the bed in my hotel room was?
Was the prayer tower?
It was the
It
prayer
was either the
tower.
Golden Driller or the prayer tower.
It was the prayer tower, which I'm not sure what that says having it above the bed, but that's another podcast. But as we know, Tulsa is supposed to be one of the most religious, cities in the country, and it's become, kind of a hotbed for the rise of Pentecostalism. I know you have some stories, Mitch, that you'll probably interject, but with Oral Roberts, Kenneth Hagin, kind of leading the way. So let's talk to us more specifically about how religion has played a part in the Oklahoma swindle.
Right. Well, this is the way I see it is, and I may be overstating my case here, and if I am, I'm willing to be corrected.
All right.
But I
Just
really
for the
understand.
record, Russell,
Yeah.
we think that kind of theology is crazy. So whatever you say, and what I mean by that is that
Yeah.
it's very manipulative when it comes to playing out in the wider citizenry. So
I mean, it's how does it manage to get a hold of people to promise them things that they should know better,
right.
right? So I see oral as in that vein. The idea of expect a miracle, plant a seed and it will grow. I see this as fundamental to what we have become as a nation. The idea that somehow money,
Mhm.
financial gain will be bestowed upon you for giving your wealth, small bit of your wealth to somebody like Oral Roberts. It's really it's magical thinking is what it is, and that's why I'm hoping to call my next book The City of Magical Thinking.
Yeah.
And I think what Oral did with that and the way he planned that campus and that ultra modern gold plated majestic world he created lured so many people in thinking it could be me. It's like buying a lotto ticket.
Yeah.
It's like pulling the roulette wheel, and if that becomes a theology, like that is yeah, I
Well,
mean,
Russell,
batshit crazy is one term for it. Yeah.
there's this connection between what we just talked about, dumb Okie logic, and the religious influences that we grew up with here in Oklahoma,
Yep.
and it goes to that notion of that somehow the powerful, the elite, the most spiritual are going to take care of us, and if I can one day be like them, but I have to follow what they say, what they do, how they tell me to behave, how they tell me to act. And I think it plays a part of the entire philosophy that we see playing out here in Oklahoma. Because I mean, you talk. I often, I grew up and saw the strategy of trying to destroy Oklahoma public schools by defunding them every chance they get, or identifying them as bastions of secular humanism, and the attacks on public education. But every time we would go to the voting booth, I would see Oklahomans voting against their own self-interest and putting politicians in there that were trying to destroy public education. It's what I used to call all they would have to do is what I would say sprinkle a little Jesus on their messaging, and then people would just fall in line. And it just really blew my mind that that was the case here in Oklahoma. And I think it is becoming more mainstream
I was
across
saying,
the
but this has
country.
has become the case, and I think that's what was so interesting to us with this book. We know this is a kind of a niche audience
Right.
of Oklahomans, but that this is playing out across the country, and especially with the religious tie-in of sprinkling a little Jesus on it, and all of a sudden you've got people voting against their own self-interest
Right.
and the interest of the community at large.
And not only just against their own self-interest, but against their own family members,
Mm-hmm.
against people that they love and care for. I'm talking about LGBT
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
A good story and a good way to think about a lot of this is my friend and a fellow writer named Randy Roberts Potts. I don't know if you know him. He'd be a great guest for you
Yeah.
because he's the grandson of Oral Roberts, and he grew up in that world, and he was very much, believed in it. And he's gay, and only later in life did he realize that and realize the damage it had done. And when he tried to reconcile, his sexuality with his family, they just basically said, "You're possessed by demons."
Yeah.
And so it's casting, it's creating not only against your own self-interest, but against those people that you instinctively love, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I want to say about that is to your point about that this isn't just an Oklahoma problem, and in fact, Oklahoma is like the canary in the coal mine
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of this stuff. Is another observation I had talking to Randy about this is he said, growing up in the 80s, and I remember this in Tulsa, the Oral Roberts empire, that whole seed faith Pentecostal world was a little marginal.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I was from the kind of Republican country club set,
Right.
and they were a little dismissive. Oh, those are a bunch of holy rollers, Jesus freaks, whatever. It's different now.
It is.
That world has, and I've seen it in my own family. I have an aunt who was involved in she's in the book, involved in that world. And my cousins, who were very respectable, mainstream Protestant country club Republican types, used to just mock her. Now they kowtow to her.
Mhm.
They're all in the MAGA world. They're all in this world of believing of this hyper nationalist world that fuses Christian, like very selective Christianity that is militarized, that is fear-based, and it's become the dominant strain, I think, in that world. And that's scary to me, because it used to be, I mean, I never quite saw eye to eye with those members of my family, but at least there was a sense that we took care of
Sure.
people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of this religious kind of undertow is what allows or what makes it easier to rewrite narrative and to rewrite history, um, and to control. Like you said, it's very fear based in nature. So I'm sorry.
No,
Step over you.
to just pick up on Russell's comments. I mean, what we've seen here in Oklahoma has been this evolution of religion into the political sphere. And, I grew up in a very conservative home, split family. My mom was Democrat, my dad was a Republican, but the Republican side of my family were, kind of that Eisenhower type of Republican, fiscal conservative, very stoic, I guess, if you want to say it that way. My mom was a Jimmy Carter supporter. And so it actually, they got along, and obviously, and but it was just a different world. And there was that fringe group. Well, that fringe group has taken over not only the Republican Party, but here in the state of Oklahoma, the entire body of politic. And now that is running our state. And that's one of the things that I get really frustrated about having these conversations with some of my conservative friends, is that this is where we are headed. This ideology, this theological bent of Christian nationalism, uh, even what is even more scary is the rise of the New Apostolic Reformation and the Seven Mountains Mandate of trying to control all facets of society and culture. And that's out of C. Peter Wagner, and we see that in Paula White and others, and they're all connected to Walt Roberts and Hagen. They've all accepted this idea of trying to control society at large. Government is just the tip of the iceberg on that. And so that is what we're seeing play out here in Oklahoma with education. I mean, with every component of it, we're seeing that play out. And I hope the country is paying attention, because this is the direction that we're heading. And trust me, you and I grew up in this state. Missy's lived here for 20 years now. We don't want to go there. So,
Well, it's so we have been here before. Period I like to talk about in history that's near and dear to me, that I've researched it a lot, to see what happens when fear-based white Christian nationalist power takes root, is not, and I keep saying this, it's like, it's not Nazi Germany. It's right here in the heartland.
mhm,
If you look at the rise of the second Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s, I think that's where we're headed.
yeah,
And that was a period, again, we have the mythology of the there's a mythology of the roaring 20s. Everybody was flappers and drinking prohibition and dancing Charleston. No, 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 no. That was not, I mean, that was at least part of the 20s. The real political current of the 20s was the rise of the Klan. And the Klan, not just as it was very racist, but not just racist. It was really, if you read a Klan textbook from the 1920s, you would think you're reading a manifesto from a MAGA supporter who goes to church today. It's about defending family values, defending the American way, America first. They invented the phrase America first, defend Christianity, Christian values, and they rose and took power in state and local governments. They flogged people. They kidnapped people that they considered they were doing immoral behavior. They overthrew elections. And the good news, the good news about this is that by 1924, it had gotten so bad that Catholics, Jews, African Americans, even mainstream Protestants said, enough,
mhm,
enough. This is leading to abuses. It's doing hard societal harm. We are going to throw out the Klan. We're going to throw them out of state government. And Democrats and Republicans and people of different races and nationalities banded together and just kicked the Klan out. And I think that's where we're headed. And I hope we don't wait until they start overthrowing elections and flogging people. And I mean, well, you see a little flavor of it, right? And what's going on with ICE right now, and some
right,
of the snatching people up and throwing them. I think we're getting a flavor of it, but it could get worse,
sure.
right? But I think there is a way around it, right? We have been there, and we've seen the damage it does, and that it's not inevitable.
Mhm.
It's not inevitable. There's nothing inevitable about it.
Yeah. And I want to get to that hope here in just a second. I'm glad you led into that. But before we really jump into the hope side of things,
Continue in despair
because
for
I
a
do think
moment.
that there is hope. But you mentioned the 1920s, and that is a significant period of time for Tulsa. And for me particularly, because in 1919, my great grandmother, who was a resident in Broken Arrow, Eloise Boutenot, and her sister Ruby, were taken from their home and sent up to Chilocco. And they lived there for a couple of years, and all the atrocities at the boarding school took place to my great grandmother and my aunt. But then they got out but in 1921, there is this significant moment in Tulsa history. And like you, Russell, I grew up literally miles from Greenwood, had
Hmm.
never heard that story until I was an adult.
It's
And
not mentioned in your history class,
no,
nothing. No.
nothing. In fact, when I learned about it, it was in college when they brought it up. I was at Northeastern State University playing baseball and studying psychology at the time. And they brought it up, and I came back home and said, Dad, did you know this happened in Tulsa? And he said, Yeah, I remember, stories about it. He said, In fact, your great grandfather told a story about when he was a child out in Broken Arrow back in 21. There was a knock at his door late at night, and his dad answered it. And it was this African American family, and said that they needed some water and bread because they were on their way to Muskogee. And he said, well, okay, why? And he said, Because they're killing black people in Tulsa. And he said, but that was the only thing he kind of really knew about it. And it goes back to what we talked about in the origin story, this erasure of history. But this was a significant moment, not only in the history of Tulsa and Oklahoma, but nationwide. So, you know, why why is that story so central? Because it resonated throughout the country at the 100th anniversary. Missy and I had the privilege of being there for the 100th anniversary back in 2021. So, talk a little bit about that from your standpoint.
Right. I think now it's pretty well known. It's become an event that uh except for the current Secretary of Education, I don't know if you've
Oh,
heard.
yeah, Russell,
We're
I've sued him 3 times.
we're familiar.
It's like the ignorance continues, but I think it's changing a lot. Again, the Centennial brought it up, and there's
Mhm.
lots of interesting pop culture around it. Um, but I do think that one of the elements that isn't quite well understood enough that could be better underscored in terms of a national story, um, is how militia groups were already rooted in that world. And so when I hear about the three percenters and the Boogaloo Boys and all,
Mhm.
whatever, all these different militia groups, I think to 1921, because there was what really did the damage was not a bunch of mob of white people just spontaneously going into Black Tulsa and going crazy. They were, and I know this is going to sound like possibly bordering on a conspiracy theory, but it's very well documented that before 1921, there were militia groups that were very well organized. They were known as the Home Guards. There was the American Protective League. There was the Knights of Liberty. These are all very well documented groups that were armed groups of white people who saw it as their mission, again, to protect not just the race of white people, but white Christianity, from the threats of Bolshevism, from the threats of Judaism, from all these things that they saw were a threat from foreign agents. Okay, so when it really gets ginned up, and we have that fake news article accusing Diamond Dick Rowland of potentially raping a white girl, all of these groups are already organized, and there is an alarm that goes on, a widespread, like almost like a tornado siren that goes out on 5 a.m. on June 1st, 1921. That was the signal the invasion is on. So, and some of those organizations were not just local organizations, they had chapters in different cities. It's just that Tulsa, the particular formation of Tulsa, and the fact that the Black community was wealthy, and that there was this precipitating event, and a very racist newspaper editor who was looking for a moment to spur this invasion, this massacre, um, made Tulsa in particular so violent.
Yeah, it sounded when you're describing that, it sounded a lot like Jan 6. You had the mob mentality, but it was well organized. You had organizations like the Proud Boys who were leading the way and setting the tone for that in the background. So We are replicating
Absolutely.
history in a lot of senses.
Oh yeah, we're repeating history exactly like that. I mean, it's crazy the connection with the fake news, right? Back then it was newspapers that would print these incendiary kind of stories. People would read them, take them as truth, and then they are there's a call to action. And also, just like January 6th, at the very, very top leadership, there's a sort of like, yes, we want the support, we need the support of these people, but when push comes to shove, we're going to create just enough distance that we're not going to be prosecuted.
Right.
And again, no one. I mean, January 6th, there were the prosecutions and the people who were let off by Trump. But remember, and for all the work on reconciliation on Tulsa in 1921, the race massacre, no one was ever prosecuted. No one.
Yeah.
You
Wow.
bring up a point that I have noted because it just really resonated with me when you were talking about the revitalization of Greenwood, which we've been to and, have found just a love for that area in general. But you said, you have hope in the renaissance of Tulsa or in Greenwood, but you fear that capitalism will do what racism could not. And I cannot get that out of my mind as I think about not just Tulsa, the Greenwood district, but just so many areas in our nation at large. I mean, is what we're seeing today just this battle for capitalism to do what racism could not? I mean, talk to us a little bit about that because I can't get that out of my head.
Well, I couldn't get it out of my head either. And I mean, shout out to Nehemiah Frank, who was the editor and publisher of Black Wall Street Times, who said that to me. We were walking up and down Greenwood Ave. He said, they tried to burn us out. We came back, we rebuilt. Then they brought in don't forget, the even more consequential, actually, long term, was the
Highway.
Highway.
freeway that went right through the neighborhood. So, and under the guise of urban renewal, that also it hollowed out the neighborhood, but people still live there. But now with gentrification and the influx of capital into that area, that is going to displace people in a permanent way that those other acts of violence or acts of urban renewal could not do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I can't get it out of my head either. And I think a lot about it because on the one, and it's just one of those things that is a complicated issue because it makes my head kind of spin. On the one hand, Greenwood is attracting attention and investment in a way that it hasn't in 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing. It also means displacing people and making it unaffordable for people. That's a bad thing. It comes down to, I don't know. I don't want to have any I think it's I want to guard against any simplistic thinking. Like I think in our world in general, like we just need to think a little bit more be comfortable with sitting with contradiction and complexity,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the questions to me I keep asking, and I asked when the mayor announced a fund for reparations very short time ago, was who controls the reparations? Who is going to benefit? Is this the community itself, or is this because now there's some cachet here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is it going to be the same power elite that has used branding and mythology to consolidate power, or is it really thought out in a way that is going to find who were the people who were harmed in talk about intergenerational trauma that will benefit them? Because if that's what it is, I'm totally for reparations. I am totally for reparations, and it's a very unpopular opinion. I'm sorry, but
Well, and that is the answer. I mean, that really is the answer. And there's ways of doing it. I mean, we have wealthy reparations and called tax cuts and incentivized with tax. I mean,
but I guess making sure it's not just another form of guardianship,
right?
as well,
And that's the thing. That's
like,
the
how
nuance
can we
of this.
do it and have it not? I don't know. And like you said, we have to get comfortable with the discomfort of not having easy answers.
Yeah.
And until we broaden our imaginations to see what something looks like, and also don't just sit here in a group of, kind of white passing folks trying to have the answers. You
But
got to talk to the folks
To
who
make
are
this
impacted.
in real context, Russell, we were there at the 100th anniversary, and we saw Black leaders in North Tulsa and national Black leaders on the stage, and they were talking about reparations. And I saw all the white politicians, including Bynum, who was the mayor of Tulsa at the time, refuse to get on the stage because it scares the living hell out of them. And Bynum, I mean, and you pointed out in the book, he's a bright spot in the state of Oklahoma overall. But when you start talking about reparations, it scares the hell out of those people in power. Because one, it's an acknowledgement that there is guilt to be had. And
For better or worse, in our modern capitalist society, money is significant. It is the thing that it's acknowledgement, right? When I say, if I give you money, it's like me saying, I hear you, you're worth it, you are worthy, and I mean, that's an uncomfortable truth, right? Because we also want to transcend money, and we don't want to be
right.
strained by and value everything in a neoliberal way, like the only value is the financial value of something. But it is the common denominator in which we acknowledge the worth of something. And so I think for Tulsa to pay reparations is like, it's very symbolic. It's very powerful. And it's also very unpopular,
Right.
extremely unpopular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we could go on and on about some of the dark spots in Oklahoma and the difficulties that our state faces, but there are some bright spots, and you point those out in the book as well. We already mentioned Bynum. I mean, former mayor of Tulsa. We think we've got a great mayor here in Oklahoma City, and David Holt, who's doing great things. Even previously, we've had some great mayors. Mick Cornett, for example. We saw public educators run for public office after the teacher walkout. Our representative, Jacob Rosecrans, is our representative, former educator. There are some bright spots here in the state of Oklahoma. So, as difficult as it has been to grow up in this state and live in this state, give us some hope, because you talk a little bit about that in the 1920s a moment ago. But today, what are you seeing? What can we cling to? What can we learn from to inspire us forward?
So many things. I mean, it's not just one. There's so many things. Like Bynum was like a diet version of,
Hey, we
of
got to cling to what we can here in Oklahoma.
but now Tulsa, it got completely overshadowed by the Trump victory and the national shift to the right across the board. But Tulsa elected a Black man, Monroe Nickel, a Democrat, and a guy who's committed to reparations, a guy who is committed to police reform. He won, and no one expected him to win. And I've been watching him closely. I got just yesterday he hired a woman who's a special envoy to the Native American community, who approached me at a talk to talk about how do we create some recognition for the Tulsa Alatis, the Creek Alatis. That's coming from the mayor's office. There's so many bright spots. Let's not talk about politics for a second. Let's talk about something a little lighter. The spirit of creativity, music,
Oh
film,
my gosh. Yeah.
is extraordinary.
Sterling Harjo.
Sterling Harjo. Everything that's coming out of the post-McGirt reality of Oklahoma, Eastern Oklahoma anyway, where indigenous sovereignty is reaffirmed, because it never went away, it was never disestablished. And now we have this flourishing of native art. We have Sterling Harjo. all the things that took place, I thought the film was a little disappointing, but Killers of the Flower Moon, what took place in the wake of that, in terms of the revitalization of Pawhuska,
Right.
visibility for the Osage people, the revitalization of the native press. It's an extraordinary moment in Oklahoma for all of those reasons.
Yeah.
If you look at it from your 36,000-foot view flying over, it's just another flyover state. But once you get down on the ground, it is one of the most remarkable places, I think, in the world.
Yeah.
So for our non-Okie listeners, which are probably most, what are there lessons and truths to be gleaned from our conversation and from your work?
Yeah, I think one of the things is to the way Oklahoma in a very granular, from the roots way, is thinking about itself and reimagining itself, whether it be through the films and TV work of Sterling Harjo, whether it be through like these independent outlets of journalism. There's a lot of new journalistic outlets springing forth in Tulsa. You name it. The folk ballads of Woody Guthrie, and how Okemah used to not want anything to do with that communist radical. Well, now they celebration of the works of Woody Guthrie, and you see everyone has this machine fights fascists, everything. So I think that Oklahoma can, in a way, shows how look deeply and honestly at your own history, at your own identity, fearlessly take on the uncomfortable parts, express the beauty of it, don't be afraid of the contradiction, and don't try to be like somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to be Brooklyn, you don't have to be LA, you be yourself.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Russell Cobb, it has been a joy, my friend. Thanks for joining us here at Good Faith Weekly. Check out Russell's books. They are all terrific. Glad you're working on a new book there in Tulsa. Can't wait for that to come out. But before we let you go, Russell, we've got one last question that we ask all of our guests, and Missy has the honor of asking it.
So, Russell, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
I would say that my more to tell is The Ghosts of Crook County, which tells a story you will not see anywhere else about one potentially phantom child in an absolutely nonfiction, true crime way that will help you rethink everything you thought you know about American history.
And that's the one that's already out,
Yeah,
right?
it just came.
I was going to say, so
it's
it's in
newest book.
Fall
It's right
2024.
there. It's right there on my bookshelf. Well, we appreciate it, my friend. Thanks for joining us. You are welcome back anytime.
Oh, this has been a delightful conversation. It makes me feel so much better about leaving Canada, moving to Oklahoma.
We'll talk about that later.
You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.